this is made possible through Foundation and through NOAA, so we thank them very much. And again, for those of you just joining us, if you have questions for the end of the talk for Anne, please write them in the chat field and send them to Elizabeth Schrack, Liz, who was hosting this call, and we will be answering them at the end. We will be recording this webinar, so it will be available for you and whoever else. That we will also post the link to this recording on reefresilience.org. We will run today for 1 hour with just over 30 minutes of presentation and about 15 to 20 minutes of questions. I will keep us to time, so you will be off by 5. And again, materials are available on reefresilience.org. So let's get started. I'm going to hand this over to Anne. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction. Everybody, my name is Ann Weaver, and I'm with the Coastal Service Center. Is going to put my presentation up. Oh.
I actually have control, so you can.
Okay.
You'd be able to just click on over to TNC presentation. There you go. And the crew's at the top.
There we go. All right. Thank you. So my name is Ann Weaver, and I'm with NOAA's Coastal Service Center. The Coastal Service Center has a mission to link people, information, and technology in the coastal resource management field. So provide GIS systems, data, and information training, such as this one, the one we're going to talk about today, which is 30 minutes out of a 2 full-day training. So I'm going to condense and pick the most important parts of that 2-day training to talk about today. We also provide remote sensing services and data and social science. So that's a little bit about the Coastal Service Center. And I will get my presentation. I don't know why, but my page is not working. Oh, there it goes. I shouldn't speak before I've tried everything. All right, so the name of the workshop that we conduct on a fairly regular basis is called Navigating in Rough Seas, and this is excerpts from that workshop. The first thing I want to talk about is meeting management. When you are with difficult people, the way that you have the meeting managed will for you how easily you can manage difficult people in a meeting. So first thing to think about when you are thinking about how you're going to manage your meeting is different roles that people will play in the meeting. Typically, we have these 6 roles that are being played within the meeting, and it's important to think about which role you are playing before you get into the meeting, and something that you might want to talk to the meeting conveners with before the meeting starts. So the first role is the facilitator, and the facilitator is the person who may not have a lot of content expertise. In other words, the subject of the meeting they are not an expert at, but they are an expert at controlling the meeting and managing what we call the process. Here, on the other hand, is the person who has called the meeting is often the subject matter expert or the supervisor of many of the subject matter experts. And the difference between a leader and a facilitator is that the facilitator is neutral about what the outcome from the meeting might be. They want to make sure that you reach your outcomes, but don't want to specify what the solution will be before the meeting happens. The leader often has a vested interest in the outcome of the meeting. So one thing to think about when you're calling a meeting is if you're planning to facilitate it, and we find ourselves in this position all the time, we're supposed to be the neutral process person as has the expert, and that's the facilitating leader. And those two things are diametrically opposed, so it's difficult to try to be the facilitator if you are also the leader. So sometimes when you're having a meeting, especially one that might have different viewpoints that you're trying to hear that are in opposition to each other, you might want to think about having someone from outside your regular working group to come in and actually lead you through the process of the meeting. Now, most of our meetings aren't that contentious, but we're talking today about meetings where there's opposing viewpoints and we're trying to get those viewpoints on the table and learn how to work together. So it's important to have someone who is neutral on the outcomes. It's also important to have a recorder, and this recorder also needs to be neutral. Now, when we think about meetings, we're not going to remember who said what and how it all happened. We think we do, but sometimes we'll go back to notes and they won't be exactly what we remember happening. So it's really important that your recorder is also neutral, because as we all know, you can put bias into the notes that you're happening to take. And your recorder is running up on a flip chart for everyone in the room to see, and doing it in a neutral way. So someone raises their hands, makes a comment, and the reporter goes to write it down on a chart. If you don't write it down the way the person meant, the person might think the reporter is biasing the comments. So it's really, we don't think much about that, but the recorder is a really important neutral party in the meeting process. Something that the Coastal Service Center does on a fairly regular basis, especially on larger meetings in our training classes, is to have a process observer. That person is leader's eyes and ears. The facilitator is watching the group dynamics, keeping track of time, ensure that they're intervening when difficult situations start to arrive, giving people directions on the activities they're supposed to be doing. So the facilitator has a lot going on and has to be really, really present and know what's going on in the room. It's you, and so it's really great to have a process observer who can be another set of eyes for you in the room. So in really large meetings, really you can have a second person who is going to be the one who's taking notes for you part of the time, and part of the time watching the clock for you, and part of the time seeing how others in the room are reacting to things that are being said so they can let you know if they see a problem. And then the participants, and these are the people that we think everybody in the meeting is a participant, and those are the people who have content expertise, who can contribute to the conversations, and who can help make decisions. Make sure you have the right participants in a meeting is key to being able to reach your outcomes at the end of the meeting. So I've been talking about the facilitator is the one who's watching the process, and the leader is the one watching the content. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what I mean by that. So the content is the subject that we're going to be discussing. It's what tasks we're going to do, it's what problem we need to solve or problems, it's decisions that we need to make, it's the agenda items, it's really the goal of your meeting or your overall objectives or outcomes. The process is different, and teasing these two apart can be kind of difficult. In our two-day class, we spend a lot of time practicing teasing these two things apart. The process, the methods or the procedures we're going to use. For example, today our method is we're all going to log on to WebEx and call in, or WebEx is going to call us. The procedure is Caitlin's going to introduce, me, and then I'm going to go through a PowerPoint with you guys. So those are the things you want to think about up front, and it seems so obvious when we say it, but it's things that we overlook sometimes. How relationships are going to be maintained is part of the process. How am I going to make sure people are interacting? Am I going to have class-style seating, or I'm going to put them all at tables together? How am I going to maintain the relationships in the room? What tool materials am I going to use? Flip charts, markers, PowerPoint, different tools or materials you might use. Many of you have used ground rules or norms, as they're sometimes called, to manage groups, and that's one of the most effective things you can do, is get the group to agree up front on ground rules, and then the facilitator is to draw the group back to the ground rules sometimes. As the process, you also want to think about in advance the climate in the room, and this can be taken in several different ways. You think about the political climate, because that influences the outcomes of a meeting or the way people are interacting with each other. You might also want to think about the comfort level of the room when you think about climate. Is it going to be too hot or too cold? People get irritable when they're physically not comfortable. Power thing in the room. So you're trying to reach a decision, but there's a person in the room who everyone is intimidated by, and maybe that person has some power. So you need to think about those things up front in order to be able to manage your meetings well. So I keep referring to facilitation as one of the ways to do this, and one of the best ways to manage a group is to use some good facilitation skills. So, and you have a handout, so if you want to go back and look at the handout and what these skills are, you're welcome to do that. But what the facilitator has to always do is stay neutral. If all the opposing views trust the facilitator to be taking sides, they're more likely to open up and work through problems. What the facilitator needs to be able to do is to listen actively. That means being very present, really understanding what the person is saying, and training that with your body language. So if we're leading a group and you are someone who nods yes, you have to nod yes to everybody in the group. If you're a nodder, nod to everybody, whether you agree or not. If it's that you indicate that you're listening, then you need to nod to everybody. So be aware of that body language that shows whether or not you are actively listening to that person. Stay neutral is if someone's talking about something and you're not clear, or you think others in the room might not be clear, is to ask them questions about what they're talking about to get them to be more explicit about what they're trying to say. Phrasing is a great facilitation tool, especially when you have opposing views in the room. So I'm from the South, so I'm going to say, if I have the Hatfields and the McCoys in the room, I will paraphrase what Mr. Hatfield says, because I know that Mr. McCoy, listen, he completely tunes out Hatfield because they have a long history of issues. But I say it, or the facilitator in the room paraphrases what he said and says it back. Mr. McCoy is more likely to hear it. And that's a really powerful tool. That's a really powerful way to help them it from a different voice. Summarizing is similar, and this is a really good tool at the end of a conversation where you think that you're ready to start changing topics, you can summarize briefly everything that's been discussed, and that lets people know that you've heard them. So it's really, really important. Facilitating it, like I said, you're watching all the people, you're keeping track of time, you're trying to make sure that there's no interactions that are going on that are difficult. It's hard to remember all these things. So I just want you to look at the first letter of each of those bullet points, and it spells out slaps. So when you are facilitating, if you can remember that you want to slap your participants around, it will help you remember. Stay neutral, listen actively, ask questions, paraphrase, and summarize. And your job well. You got beat up by both sides, trying to stay in the middle without being able to hear people. So, few additional facilitation skills are listed here, and I won't spend much time on these, but one is called ping pong. So if someone asks a very difficult question, and by answering it, you are going to appear as if you are taking sides, what you can do is ping pong that question to someone else in the audience. What do you think about that? And that's a really way to help people keep yourself neutral and help you to keep the conversation going. It's also a way to have a group talking to each other instead of talking directly to you. Singing is a really difficult thing to do, but what that does is if you're really listening to what everybody's talking about and there's a common thread that's running through all of it, if you can string thread together and show them sort of where there's an intersection between different issues or positions, it will help get ideas flowing. So that's one you have to really practice, but synthesizing is an excellent skill if you can do it. Hold up a mirror is one that I want you to remember because this is one we're going to use with difficult people. Holding up a mirror is where you just reflect back to the group what you are hearing. So say to the group, perhaps it's right after lunch, and so you look out and you see a bunch of glassy-eyed people staring at you, and they've been trying conversations, but they just can't engage because they're having the after-lunch insulin attack. So you hold up a mirror and you say, I can see that you're all struggling right now to pay attention. So I'd like to do, and so whatever, you're reflecting back to them, you can see that, or the group looks like they're ready for lunch, or anyway, it sets up a I feel your pain kind of thing. Tracks is something that a facilitator needs to be very good at, and it requires that you have some information about the content of the meeting, so you can tell when people are getting off track. But one of the worst things in a meeting is to never get past agenda item 1 because you went off on some tangent and no one ever pulled you back. So that's an important thing for facilitators to do. The next really important thing for a facilitator to do is to recognize when there's something that needs to be discussed that's not on the agenda, but that's important to somebody, and that's parking lot. And I'm sure you've all heard of parking lots before. I actually don't use parking lots in my facilitations anymore because they're so impervious. So I use a marina, and I ask people to dock their ideas. One thing about a parking lot, though, is it's not a place where you put everything to go and die. You have to follow up with it by putting it onto the next or some way that you're going to handle the parking lot. I actually have my marina on my agenda as the last action item of the meeting. So we do address how we're going to deal with those issues that come up. Again, those are our ground rules. Those are an important thing that you can lean on when you're facilitating. So how does all of this help us improve our discussions with groups that have different viewpoints about things? One, you'll have an agenda with a clear purpose and objectives, and everyone in the room will know about it because that's what the facilitator and the leader have prepared in advance. You'll have rules, you'll have a good facilitator who's respecting timing, labeling sidetracks, and everyone get a chance to be heard. And last thing that we don't think about a lot but is really important is that when you're getting to make a decision, majority rules is not the only way to do it. So having an agreed upon decision-making process, if you want to get to a consensus or you want some kind of compromise, you want to verbalize that up front so that everyone knows what it is we're trying to do. Talk about those difficult people. This is the part you all have been waiting for. This is a guide to difficult people, and I'm going to have to do what I usually take a couple of hours to do fairly quickly. So what I'm going to do is get through the theory first, and if we have time to go through some stereotypes, I will, but if we don't, I've provided all of our stereotypes and which facilitation techniques to use on each of those in a T&C handout, which I right here. All right? So you will be able to go back and get that off their website if you'd like to. So the thing that you have to understand is if people are being difficult, it's probably because there is a change of some type that they perceive is coming. So this summer I ended up having to facilitate an awful lot of public meetings about the BP oil spill. I'm actually located at the Coastal Service office in the Gulf, so I work in Mississippi. I across the whole Gulf. I live in Mississippi. My office is in Mississippi. And we saw lots of potential changes, and we didn't know what they were going to be while that oil was spilling and then after the well was plugged. So when you're facilitating a meeting, it's important to understand that when people are really wound up, it's because something is in their mind about to change and they're afraid of that change. So what you want to do is figure out where they are in this change curve. That will help you figure out how to deal with them so that you are not, it'll help you facilitate the meeting. So the way the curve works is if you look at it, you start over on the far left at the top, and people, when there's a change coming, are in denial in a little bit. They don't really believe that change is important, and we see this a lot with climate change and sea level rise, which I'm sure you all are having to deal with. The next step in the process is resistance. And so that is when, okay, I accept that the sea level is rising. I may not accept what's happening or what the science says, and I don't think it's going to affect me. So I'm going to resist changing anything I do because I'm happening, but it's really not a relationship to me. One resistance phase, most people will start to move into the exploration phase. And that is, okay, this change is happening. I think it might affect me, so I need to start to explore my options. And that's when they're looking into things that they can do. And explore more about the science or the information that is bringing about this change. And then the next phase, and some people get there and some people don't, depending on how entrenched they are in their feelings about it. And maybe the change never happens, but once the evidence is there that the change is going to happen and they've looked at all their options, there's some people who will become committed to that change and committed to making the best of the change. And when you are working with a group of difficult people, there are a lot of things that can happen on this curve that can make them difficult. One is that if you've got a lot of people in the commitment phase and a lot of people in the denial phase, are really not going to see the issue from the same perspective. And so it's important for the facilitator to recognize that so that they can start to help those people have the conversation that they need to have. So that's important to understand where group is, or to understand that people are in different areas of this change curve. So it helps you figure out how you're dealing with people, how you're going to deal with their conflicts. So let's just say that of us on this call who are interested in this subject are the normal people. The rest of the world may not be normal. So let's look at what motivates people to be difficult. Why might someone create a problem in a meeting? I believe that nobody wakes up in the morning and decides they want to be difficult in a meeting. Whose day am I going to ruin by raising Cain in a meeting? I now think that there are some people who strategize to make meetings kind of difficult. But for the most part, if you've got a good meeting where people are working together to try to solve a problem, it's personalities that make it difficult. So we have passive people, people who don't actively engage, and have aggressive people. Sometimes the passive people hold the key to solving the issue. So it's important to engage them, and it takes a little more work because they don't necessarily volunteer the information. People volunteer it over and over and over again. So the facilitator's job is to work with the aggressive people to calm them down and work with the passive people to get them to be more verbal. Additionally, we can divide this into task-focused and people-focused people. And really all of you are looking at this and recognizing which one of these quadrants you belong in. Focused people are the ones who just want to finish it up so they can get on to the next thing. People-focused people really want to manage those relationships. So you have an aggressive task-focused person. They may be being difficult by pushing to get finished, to get the job done. And that's when the facilitator can say, listen, I know that it's really important to you that we get this done, but I assure you that we are going to get it done. Give them that assurance that you're going to do what they want, but it's important that we hear from everybody else as well. The people-focused people really want to get appreciated. They want to be that, yes, we're going to get credit for this. Yes, we're really making a difference. Yes, this is an important thing. So you want to think about, how can I let them know that I appreciate them and all the work that they're doing? The passive people, they just want everyone to get along. And those are the people who get extremely uncomfortable when the room has a lot of tension in it. So to get them to engage, and remember, they may be the ones that have the key to the solution, you need to make sure that the tension is addressed in the room. And there's a task-oriented passive person, and they want to get it perfect. And I liken this to our biologists who just want one more repetition. I'm just of the experiment before I publish my research. I just need a little bit more. But sometimes getting it perfect is not as important as getting it done. And so moving that person, making them understand that you're going to have a quality product and we don't have to keep working on the nitty-gritty details. And sometimes letting that person work on something on their own after the meeting to, dot every I and cross every T will help them. So think about, what can I let them do so that they can add their little perfectionist touch to it? And sometimes, depending on your project, that's hugely, hugely important. So the facilitator is working with all of these difficult people, and there's all kinds of things going through his head, and I encourage you to keep the thoughts in the little bubble thought, not to say them. So when someone says to you, I feel like nobody really likes me, don't tell them they're a fruitcake, but it's okay to think about it. This is the main thing that I would like for all of you to take away, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time on this slide, but in your handouts, you'll see that if we keep going through, you'll see that I've got different people with strategies to deal with those people, and I promise that no sea life was hurt in the making of that presentation. This process works is when someone is being difficult in a meeting, and whether facilitating or not, this is a wise process you can use to mitigate and redirect some of that behavior. So is that facilitation skill where I said you hold up a mirror. So if is yelling at Bob because he doesn't like something Bob has done, you might mirror and say something like, Al, I can see you're really passionate about this, and you feel strongly that Bob hasn't done what he needs to do. So that's holding up the mirror. You're reflecting back what you see. Then an impact statement. And the impact statement would be, but we're creating a lot of tension in the room by interacting in this method or in this way. And we agreed at the beginning with our rules that we were going to treat each other with respect. So I'd like for you to, and now I'm moving into the redirect. So I'd like for you to let Al have his, or Bob have his opportunity to speak. Hold up a mirror. You tell the group the difficulty you're seeing. Take an impact statement. How is this impacting our meeting, our ability to move towards our objectives, our process? And redirect the behavior. So now you want to say to Al, shut up, let Bob talk. But instead you say, Al, I understand that you have some very strong feelings about this. I'd also really like to hear from Bob. So Bob, can you tell us about this? So that is basically how you would do the intervention process. This is really, really hard to do and takes a lot of practice. So I would that you think about it before you use this, and you practice it at home or with coworkers in scenarios where you might be able to talk about how might be the best way to do this. And that way, you're more comfortable with this process, but is an extremely effective process if you can practice it, get comfortable with it, and begin to use it in situations where someone is acting appropriately in a meeting. And Caitlin, I think I will wrap up and take questions. Actually, let me just quickly go through these slides and say, in these slides we talk about the complainer who's negative about everything, the dominator who's hostile, the know-all who comes across arrogant, the talker, the motor mouth, the super agreeable yes man who probably take on more than they should, your participator, the apathetic one, the one who's indecisive, the troublemaker, this is the passive aggressive one who stings you as soon as you turn around. This one erupts the class by being the comedian, and these are just cute guys when the meeting is over. So with that, Caitlin, back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Anne. That was really fantastic. I'll just sort of go right into some of these questions. And if you do have questions, again, can you just press the little raise your hand button or send your question directly to Elizabeth Schrack, the host. So where are we? So first question to start with is I'm not sure who this type of person would be in those descriptions just showed, but one person asked, there's a lot of grandstanding that happens at meetings, and that happens all over the place, but this is in the Pacific. Is there an effective and tactful way to handle this? So you just gave one example, but maybe if you could give another example of somebody who sort of grandstands and what you might do, language of what you might do to handle that, especially when it's a facilitator leader and not necessarily a facilitator and a leader separately.
Right, which is hard, and sometimes your audience can help you as well. So you have a grandstander. They are the aggressive side, and they might be doing it to appreciate it or get attention. They might be doing it because they want to get something done. So you're going to have to judge that as you go along. Several different techniques for grandstanders, and with the BP oil drill, we've had lots of grandstanders. So one is to really acknowledge that you understand that they are really frustrated or upset about it. And then sometimes you can write on a flip chart what they're saying and ask them if you've captured it, and that will assure them that you've heard them. And sometimes if you're in a meeting where they're really disrupting your ability to get anything done, you can set time limits. But allowing people to vent a bit is also important. So it's when it's out of hand. So you might want to redirect their behavior, like say, I think you made this point. I'm going to write it up on the flip chart. Is there anything that you need to add to that that's not captured by this, or can we move on? And once you say that to them once or twice, well, actually 2 or 3 times, they will eventually say, "You've got it. Let's move on." They know they're being difficult.
Great, thank you. The next one has to do with the difference between the content versus the process slide you had. And if it is a contentious meeting, are there things you can change in the process part that might make it more amenable to get to the goal or through the content?
And actually, that is the whole key to an effective meeting, is developing your process up front based on what you're trying to accomplish. So, for example, I have lots of different tools that I demonstrate in my workshop to show different ways. If you want a lot of input from people and you need to get it pretty fast, you could put flip charts with questions up on the walls all around the room and ask people to walk from chart to chart and write their answer. That keeps people from what the right answer is. It makes people know that they're able to, they get to get some input. There's many different processes you can use to keep things from getting contentious. That was just one example. And if you're interested, there is a website you can go to that lists a bunch of, I think you can actually just Google process skills, and it'll come up with a whole bunch of different processes you can use.
So that would actually look at sort of, like room dynamics and how you could set it up to make going to a known contentious meeting a little bit less contentious, or a little less amenable, or more amenable? Okay.
And you can set it up so that they only get 3 minutes to talk, or they get a one-on-one conversation with the expert and then they have to rotate, or, things like that. You set up your process so that you can manage the group that will help you meet your objectives.
Great. Thank you very much. Next one here is, can you talk a little bit more about how to help move people along that transition curve you talked about, especially with different parts of that curve. How do you kind of walk people through with what kind of lean back the folks, for instance, who are already in commitment phase?
Right. Yeah. You can't really move people through this curve any faster than they are going to move through it. But what you can do, there are several things that there's some studies out that show what help people change, and education and a full understanding of the issue is huge. So helping people converse about why I feel this way and why you feel that way and what is the underlying issue, helping people move away from the position, so I'm against it, to I'll think about it, is get down to what I'm really concerned about. So, for example, and I've had lots of people tell me this, I'm against any no-take zones in the ocean. I should be able to fish anywhere I want. Well, if you get down to the bottom of it, and they'll tell you it's my freedom, it's my right, whatever all those things are, but when you get right down to the bottom of it, they want to be able to catch as many fish as possible anywhere they happen to be. And so if you can start talking about, well, what might a no-take zone help you with, maybe it'll make more fish be on the outside of that no-take zone. So it's getting away from I'm against that to what's the issue that you're trying to solve by being against it, and what do we know about that issue?
Yeah, that helps me for sure. If we're not full train questions that have been asked, let us know, and we can either contact you directly or you can email us directly, and we'll follow up some more. Okay, moving on to the next one here. Do you personally have any insight onto some very practical ideas like temperature of the room, food, breaks, etc., to make things that are contentious less contentious, or to ensure that things flow and stay, peaceful?
Yeah. If you want people to be comfortable talking with each other, don't sit them classroom style. If you have a really huge meeting where it's really just giving them a lot of information, classroom style is great. It's perfect. You can fit more people in. But you don't want a smaller workshop where you're trying to get people to work on a problem together and solve something. You want them at table rounds, or you want them where they're facing each other and they have workspace. As room temperature goes, it depends if your room is full of men or full of women, because women are always cold and men are always hot. So I really try to keep the room about 72 degrees. For me, because I'm the facilitator, I'm also female, in case you couldn't tell by the name or the voice. I'm always cold, but because I'm usually pretty warm. So it's one of the things that your process observer can let you know. But I actually really don't like if I'm in a room where we can't or someone can't adjust the temperature, because if people are really cold or really hot, they're not going to be engaged. The thing is if they need to go to the bathroom or they're hungry, they're not going to be engaged. So it's really important to give a break more than every 2 hours. You have to give a break every 2 hours. And I've had lots of bosses who say, let's just push through it. But the fact is, everybody checks out. So you may push through it and you might get to the end of your agenda, but you probably haven't accomplished much because, things have sort of checked out. So lots of breaks. And that's a question, because I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, no, the other part of the practices are which we actually run into all the time. Anything about snacks?
Food. Yeah, that was what I was going to talk about. So people need to eat, and if they're hungry, it's not good. So, situation, especially if you're a federal or state employee, because you can't buy any food. But I take chocolates with me when I train because it's such a huge difference that it's worth the expense to me. Don't give chocolate in the morning. So in the mornings, you want prototype snacks with low sugar. You want them to have a decent lunch, so give them enough time to do that or bring in or whatever. In the late afternoons, chocolate. Chocolate keeps them going. But they'll crash in about an hour and a half, so you don't want to do it in the afternoon. So, but in that after lunch lull, about an hour after lunch, if they have some chocolates or some kind of candy or something, or sugary things, it really will help keep them going, unless, of course, they eat too much or whatever. But access to food is hugely important. If you can't provide it, then they need to have enough time to go get it, especially morning break and lunch.
Great. Okay.
Because we eat breakfast before they come, except the facilitator who doesn't want to get caught up there hungry.
Okay, we have two raised hands. We're going to go to Diana Ollinger first and to Summer. So, Diana, you should be unmuted.
No, she's not.
Oh, be on here. Looks like maybe you're not on. Oh.
There we go.
Okay. How Summer? Did you have a question? Summer Moore?
Unmute them.
Oh, okay. It may not be. Like we don't see you guys on the phone.
Maybe type it in the box to all.
Yeah. You guys, if your hand up, for whatever reason, we're not hearing you. So,
Diana is not called in.
If you have a question, if you could just type it in, that would be great. Okay, and it looks like Steph has a question.
Hi, this is Stephanie. I have a question about dealing with negative people. Somebody that has shown up and doesn't want to help the meeting, like you said at one talk about people that just have strategies to make the meeting difficult. And I'm curious how you deal with somebody who's shown up and clearly doesn't want to progress and shoots down every idea and opportunity during the session.
Stephanie Weir?
Yep, sorry.
No, right. Stephanie Kavanaugh's on here too.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
So I actually had one of these just last week. We actually were doing a Gulf Coast Restoration Task Force public input meeting last week where we were talking about some plans that we're doing to restore the Gulf Coast. And we had a nonprofit group, an advocacy group that's just local down here. It's not a national one. And they had a very tightly planned strategy for disrupting the public meetings. And so they split up, and we had 3 breakout groups. I was doing one of the breakout groups, and they went into each of the 3 groups, and they were actually yelling while we were trying to tell them what we were trying to do. So what I written some ground rules that said one person talks at a time, you're acknowledged, make sure you have the microphone, and please respect the others in the room. So I them if they could, part of it is just giving them options. So I gave them the microphone and I said, please remember that we're here to respect other people and the objectives of the meeting are to do X, Y, and Z. And if you have something to contribute, please do. But if it's not on that topic, we have other ways, which is something else that you might want to consider. We had comment cards for them to fill out if they wanted to give input to the task force that was related to the meeting we were having. So I just said, I understand that you're frustrated about this issue. I wrote the issue up on the flip chart. Did I capture it correctly? Yes, you did. And you know, we want to respect everyone in the room. And, you know, once you have the microphone, you're welcome to ask your question, but I don't want people talking over everybody else. One person talks at a time. And you know what? They're reasonable. They stopped. It's hard, though. You have to be really firm.
Great. So one last quick question here, and then we'll wrap up. Let's see if I capture this right. It's a lot of there's been meetings where people sort of go off on tangents or talk about things not relevant to the task at hand, and the facilitator and or leader don't pull them back. What is your thought on participation of other audience members, other participants in trying to jump in, sounds like, and play that role or say something if they're very frustrated and annoyed that, you know, certain people keep going off on tangents and aren't getting sort of reined in?
So the question, and my feeling is that it's time, if you've been asked to sit in that meeting and you are supposed to contribute something, you have the perfect right to tell the person they're off task, although you don't want to become the difficult person. So we call that stealth facilitation, and that intervention technique I was talking about, where you hold up the mirror, you make an impact statement, and you redirect the behavior, is a perfect thing to do as a participant. So you wait until they have finished a little bit of their discussion that's sort of off topic and say something like, thanks, Dan, I really appreciate that information, although it was my understanding we were here to talk about blah, 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 and I'd like to hear more or not about what you were talking about, but I also have to leave this meeting right on time, and I really want to make sure we get through blah, blah, blah. And actually, if you're upset about it, 50% of the people in the room are as well. So they'll all be glad you did it. We call that stealth or guerrilla facilitation.
Great. One last question, just sort of submitted, and we'll be quick. The question: what are some suggestions on dealing with people who come to meetings with the specific goal of disruption, especially when facilitating is also the person having to lead the meeting? So it's a leader facilitation.
Leader facilitator is a really hard thing, and so I recommend that the leader ask some of their staff or other people to represent the content in the meeting if they're going to facilitate, so they can be neutral. And then if someone has come to the meeting to intentionally disrupt, get under the skin of the facilitator, they will. So don't let that happen. Look at it as a process, not as a personal thing. And just stay as neutral as you can, and you know, ask them questions, capture their input on flip charts, and intervene if you have to. But you have ground rules that say this is how we're going to do it, and that way having a process developed is so helpful. If your process says we're going to spend you an introduction to the subject, we're going to split into small groups, and we're going to come up with 3 different solutions in each group, and we're going to come back, we're going to report out. To have processes like that developed, it's hard for them to disrupt.
Great. Okay, thanks to you, everybody who came today. Thanks to Liz for hosting and handling all the questions, and a big thank you to you, Anne, for a wonderful presentation. A reminder, the recording will be sent out via a link, as well as being listed on the reefresilience.org website, as well as these resources that are listed right here. We will be having another webinar on the Reef at Risk Revisited coming up probably in April, so stay tuned for that. And again, a big thank you to everyone. If you have additional questions, please let us know. And thanks, and have a great evening or morning wherever you are.
Thanks much. Bye.
Bye.